there, and welcome to the Abundant Self Podcast, a podcast where we talk about everything there is to learn and to know about what it truly means to have life and life in abundance. My name is Sharon Chababai, and thank you so much for tuning in. Hello, and yes, welcome to the Abundant Self Podcast. I am so excited to be here yet again after a few weeks of silence. But thank you so much to all those who have kept listening to the podcast. I think every single day I wake up in the morning and I open my dashboard and I see that guys are still tuning in to a previous episode, and I think that encourages me a lot. So welcome, Karibu Sana, to the Abundant Self Podcast. If this is your very first time here, it is my hope and prayer that by the time you're done listening to this episode, that you will have made a decision to become a part of the Abundant Self community. So do feel at home, Karibu Sana, bienvenue. And yeah, I do hope that today's episode is going to be one that is going to add value. I think I had mentioned in the previous episode that of late, I have been keen on creating quality content and not just quantity, And I know it's cliche when people or other creators talk about it, but it's something that I have really been taking seriously. And this episode is one that I have been ruminating on for quite some time, and especially because it is something that I also wanted to see reflect in my life as well. I think one of the things that I have been very, very keen on as a creator and as a podcaster, more so when talking about living a life of abundance or living a full and abundant life, is that I just don't want it to be something that I come on here on the mic and talk about and I'm not really experiencing the same in my life, I want us to be able to walk that journey together, if it's falling, if it's picking ourselves up, if it's just learning and relearning. It's something I want to be practical, I want at the end of it all for it to be said that Chababai did live a full life. Chababai did live an abundant life. And I don't want to do it alone. I want to do it with you as well. Yeah, so this episode is one that I have been thinking and ruminating on for quite some time. And I remember in the previous episode when we were talking about when life gets overwhelming, I had hinted of a podcast that I have also been listening to that sort of helped to confirm what has been going on in my mind. Honestly, just landing upon that podcast has been, it has been just amazing. It has been encouraging. And yeah, the podcast is called Be Encouraged by, I think her name is Courtney. Yes, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but yes, that particular podcast, I think I have linked that in the previous episode show notes, and I'm going to do the same for this particular episode. And particularly today, I wanted us to talk on idolatry. And yes, I know the title of the episode is saying being Delulu is not the Solulu, but yes, I wanted to talk about idolatry, and more so when it comes to our futures. And that is something that I hope you're able to stick around to learn more about. Again, it's something I've been really thinking about. It's something I've been ruminating on and really taking time to just understand it in its entirety. And especially because it's an area that I got convicted on. Is it convicted on or convicted in? That one, yeah, so I hope it's something that will also speak to you with the same way it spoke to me, or it's rather going to just open your eyes and make you look at, idolatry or just anything else in a new and refreshing way. But before that, allow me to recap our previous episode where we were talking about when life gets overwhelming. And I mean, this has been happening a lot to me this second half of the year. Life has been, I don't want to say it's been hitting me left, right, and center, but it has attempted, life has attempted to hit me left, right, and center on all corners, from all corners. And I have been going through a transition in a couple of areas in my life. And of course, just settling in it has taken a lot of time, a lot of energy, but I am getting there. I am not there yet, but I'm not so badly off. And I remember just speaking about it in that previous episode and just talking about how sometimes we find that the reason life becomes overwhelming is because we have allowed for it to become overwhelming. The reason things sometimes get tough, the reason life gets tough is because sometimes we are the ones who have allowed for it to happen. And either it could be because we are not setting the right boundaries, either it could be because we are missing those signals or those alarms. I always like to think that within ourselves, we have those warnings or signals. I can't find the perfect word to explain it, but those are, it's like an alarm system, a personal alarm system that lets you know that things are not gonna turn out okay. For example, even when we talk about burnout is not something that you just wake up in the morning and suddenly you are burnt out. I mean, this is something that happens because of a series of decisions or choices or patterns that you have allowed or let happen, and then slowly it progresses to burnout. So the same thing happens when life gets overwhelming. You find that more often than not, we have decided to do life all on our own. And you have decided to bite more than you can chew. You have decided to handle every area of your life all by yourself, realizing or failing to realize that that is not how it was supposed to be. We were never meant to handle everything on our own. We were never meant to be the pilot of our ship. These things, I just, every time I come here on the podcast, I think I always remember what even inspired me to start this podcast in the first place. When people talk about YOLO, when people talk about, living life to the fullest, all those catchy phrases that easily roll off our tongue. Now I'm just being reminded of that one phrase: you are the captain of your ship, or you are the author of your story. And it's not true. You are not the author of your story. You are not the pilot of your ship. I mean, God is. And most times we find ourselves letting these things manifest themselves in our lives such that you want to be in control of everything, of every outcome, of every situation, that life suddenly becomes overwhelming. Because when you want to be in control of everything, when you want to be in control of every outcome, when you want to be in control of every situation, surely you were not meant to handle that. You're not meant to handle all that. God calls us to surrender our lives to Him. And it's so interesting that while, yes, He has given us a will of our own, He is always hoping and waiting and trusting, maybe, I don't know if that is the right word to use, that we will just as much let go of our will and be willing to let His will be done. I mean, it's such an easy prayer to make, to say, Lord, let your will be done. And I do this so many times, sometimes when I don't have the strength in me or the capacity in me to just pray, I just often find myself telling God, hey, Joe, Mazi, let your will be done. I don't even know how this situation is going to turn out. I don't know what's going to happen here. I don't know what to do, but let your will be done. But often we find ourselves just saying it as a prayer, but not really realizing the intensity and how powerful of a prayer it is. And often we find that life gets overwhelming because we want to be in control. We want to own everything. We want to do everything all by ourselves, forgetting that we actually have a Father who cares about us, who even tells us, bring all your burdens to me because I care for you. Yeah, so before I make this a part two, of our previous episode, feel free to either press pause right here and go back to and listen to that particular episode, or you can listen to this episode up until the very end, and then once you are done, you can go and listen to our previous episode on when life gets overwhelming. So yes, like I said, on today's episode, we are going to be talking about idolatry. And I mean, I don't even know how to start with this episode. I don't know. This is, I have really thought about this episode for a while. But yeah, I think I'm ready to speak on this, because it's something that it has been, I don't know if I want to say a thorn in my flesh, but it has been something that I have really been thinking about. And just to start off, I remember when we used to be kids, even as I was prepping for this episode, I remember when I was thinking, and I was remembering when you used to go to Sunday school and you used to be taught the 10 Commandments, and it says, do not commit idolatry. And immediately you'd think of idols as those miniature gods that either the Israelites or Egyptians or whoever it is in the Bible created and worshipped, those materialistic gods or forms of gods, quote unquote. And you'd think, by the way, no, we cannot commit idolatry. So, our minds and our understanding of idolatry were limited to that particular scenario, right? And I think later on, as you grow up and as you even grow in faith and grow in understanding of the word, you come to learn, or rather I came to learn, that idolatry is, or rather an idol is literally anything that takes away the glory of God, like anything that shifts your focus from God. And I remember, even as I was thinking of idolatry, I was also thinking of this song. There's a song that says that, God is a jealous God, or it's even actually just in the Bible. And I used to think to myself, what does that even mean? Because my understanding of jealousy na inaandikwa kwa Bible, they're not the same. They are definitely not the same. But I think later on, I was able to correlate both concepts of, when you talk about God being a jealous God, is that he doesn't want you to focus on anything that is not him. He doesn't want you to focus on whether it's your job, whether it is your relationship, your marriage, your children. He doesn't want you. He wants your life to be about him. He wants you to focus on him. Even the very purpose that God has given to us, even the very blessings that God has given to us, yes, they are good, but more often than not, we turn these things into idols. And I remember I was thinking about a while ago, just before I quit my previous job, and I had really been fixated on getting a job. Like, I would pray for a job day and night. I would pray for a job. And then later on, I realized that, later on when I even got this job, I stopped praying. Like, it was almost like, that transactional kind of prayer where you're just praying to God for something, and then when that thing is granted to you, you forget about God and you go ahead about your life. And I remember I was always, even while I was in that job, man, I could not dream of losing that job. Like, I could not even have the slightest thought of losing that job. I had held that job so dear to my heart, and at a point I was just like, yep, this is definitely an idol. Because if this is the very thing I prayed for, this is the very thing that I was hoping to get, and it has been given to me, and this is the very thing that is keeping me away from God, that is taking all the glory, that is taking all my time, that is taking all my attention, it becomes an idol. And I think like many other things that we have spoken about here on the podcast, something just doesn't, you just don't wake up and suddenly your job is an idol. These are things that happen as a result of those decisions or those patterns or those choices that you make that slowly by slowly, day by day, form or morph into an idol. Yeah. So I remember just thinking about it like that. And I was even listening to the podcast episode by Courtney. And I was just like, there's so many things in life that we have made into idols. And for the first time, that commandment that do not commit idolatry, for the first time, it made a lot of perfect sense. Because in life, we find ourselves chasing after so many things, chasing after money, which is an idol for many, chasing after money, after fame, chasing after relationships, chasing after marriage, that we do not realize that we have made these things our idols. Literally, it's like you've taken hizi vitu zinaitwaje, pingu. I cannot believe I'm remembering the word in Kiswahili. What are they called? When someone is being arrested, and what are they called? Pingu. My days, I cannot remember that. I can't. The fact that I'm remembering that word in Kiswahili. Handcuffs. Handcuffs, it's like you're taking handcuffs and you're literally cuffing yourself to money, you're literally cuffing yourself to fame, you're cuffing yourself to marriage, to a relationship, to career or a job, to your career or your job, and it becomes your idol, such that your life cannot exist or your life cannot fully happen when this thing is not there. And I mean, is it really true? Is it really true? And I mean, that conviction is so, when you think about it, when you really think about it, let's talk about marriage and relationships, for example. I think my generation at the moment is one that is very skeptical about marriage. And even if we decided to put marriage aside and talk about relationships, everywhere, whether it is you're watching a movie, whether it is you're listening to music, whether it's you're reading about a book, or even the conversations we have with our friends, you will always find someone, the common denominator would be just a conversation on relationships. It's something that we have idolized, and it's not a conversation we are really ready to have. Yeah. It's not a conversation we are ready to have, because you find that from the moment or from the minute we are conscious about ourselves, or we start understanding what happens all around us or in the world, somehow people just, I don't know what it is, but you'll always find people talking about relationships. And I mean, it is a good thing. Remember, like, when we talk about idolatry, especially in this day and age, it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. I mean, relationships are a good thing. Getting married is a good thing. But so often than not, these things have become idols, because you find someone is every single time, like you're just talking to someone, and I remember someone was asking me my age the other day, and they're like, yeah, right now you need to start thinking about getting married, having a family. And in my head, I'm like, okay, I mean, yes, it is good to think about all those things, but there is more to life than being in a relationship. There is more to life than being married. I mean, look at Paul. in the Bible. I mean, Paul, yes, he set such high standards for Christians or for all followers of Christ all around the world, but he lived a full life. We cannot possibly say that his life was lacking because he chose to never marry, or his life was lacking because he did not decide to do a certain thing that maybe society deems, you have to do before you die, or you have to do if at all you are to live a good life. We cannot say that. He lived a great life. He lived a life that glorified God. And yes, he had his weaknesses. Yes, he had moments when he maybe did not represent the calling for which he was called, maybe, right? But he lived a life that gave glory to God. And that is, I think, something that I think it's a journey that I have been walking, and it has not been easy. It hasn't been easy at all. It hasn't been easy because it has even gone to a point of, sometimes, especially with fashion and everything that's going on right now. I remember there's a day I just woke up in the morning and I looked at myself in the mirror and the outfit I had chosen, and it felt so boring. Like it felt like I kept telling myself, Ata, you haven't put any effort at all into what you've chosen to wear. But I remember, I think when I was just leaving my house, I was asking myself, but then again, the way I have dressed, does it glorify God? Is it pleasing to God? And I was like, yeah, it is pleasing to God. And I just smiled, and I remember I didn't even worry about it. Oh, maybe I'm not, what I've worn isn't fashionable or what have you. But I remember when I just had that question in my mind, does what I have worn glorify God? I felt great about myself, actually. And I was even confident leaving the house and, going to whatever it is I was going. But back to the point, we have turned these things like being married into an idol, because think about the many people who have gotten to a certain age and they're like, yeah, I haven't gotten a husband or I haven't gotten a wife, and you're constantly beating yourself up about it. You're constantly going about life, and it's everywhere. Someone would look at someone, and it's so bad because you find someone is looking at someone and they're like, Ebu, imagine she's 30 years old and she's not yet married. Or in his 40s. I was watching a show the other day and they're like, at your 40s and you don't even have a wife. And in my head, I'm just like, because that is what matters. Because if the world ended today, if I was not married, or if I never got married, the world would end. I mean, these are things that, yes, they are good. That, yes, if you have a desire to get married, marriage is, first of all, it's a covenant. It's a godly union. It's a godly institution. It's a godly institution. It's not something that is evil. But we have taken these things, these gifts that God has given us, and we have made them into idols. Yeah. And so I sat down and I wrote some of the things I believe even I myself have turned into idols, and believe it or not, relationships were one of them. The other thing was money. And like I mentioned, also my career and my job. I remember there was a time when I was so fixated on, I have to graduate. This is the kind of job I have to get. This is the kind of place I'm going to work. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to progress into the next step of my career. And it's something I was so fixated on that when it didn't happen, when it did not turn out the way I wanted it to turn out, let me tell you, hey, yo. My days. It was crazy. It was painful. But there's an idol that I want us to talk about in depth on today's episode. And that idol is called the future. the future. The future as an idol. When I was talking about the previous episode on what happens when life gets overwhelming, I remember later on thinking about how more often than not, when things get tough, when life gets overwhelming, and when life or things get tough, most times, all we need is hope, yeah? We just need something that will give us hope. And more often than not, the very thing that gives us hope is usually the future. Knowing that, hey, things are going to get better. Things are going to be better. Better days are coming ahead. And for a while, that thing becomes our source of hope. Just looking at the future. That yes, things are difficult in this moment, but things are going to get better in the future. Things are going to look up, or there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel. Things are going to get better. These are some of the things that we tell ourselves that give us hope. But recently, I found myself getting lost in that hope, getting lost in that future, in the sense that life had gotten so overwhelming, or things had gotten so tough, that I ended up spending a whole lot of time thinking about the future. Fixating on, I'm going to do this, I'm going to live here, I'm going to buy this car, and I'm going to be able to even just develop where my parents or my siblings are staying, or, those things. Like, I was so fixated. I had even imagined, I'm getting what kind of job. I was, hey. I was spending a lot of time thinking about my future. And at first, my future started off as a sign of hope, as a symbol of hope, and it got me going, just where you're like, okay, yeah, things are not working out right now, but imagine, Chabai, things are gonna get better. The future is bright. You, Nini, keep fighting, keep working hard, keep showing up, things are gonna look up. So it started out as a sign and as a source of hope. So that got me going. That got me going for a while. But then I realized that things weren't really changing. Like, my current situation was not really, things are not working out the way I wanted them to, or rather at the pace that I wanted them to work out. So the future, which was previously or initially a source of hope, immediately became a distraction, where I would find myself either, instead of sleeping, or if it, I can't believe I'm using that example, but instead of going to sleep at night, I'm busy Googling of, countries that I want to travel, or jobs that I want to get, or the kind of roles that I'm hoping for in the future. So now it's now becoming a distraction, where I don't really want to deal with what I'm going through at the moment. There's a place of looking at the future and saying, hey, yeah, things are gonna get better. So what do I need to do to get there? There's that place. And then there's a place of, that future is not even pushing you to take any action at all in your life. So what do? You use it as a distraction. Instead of taking action, instead of looking at your life and being like, what do I need to do to get to where I need to get to, or to achieve what I want to achieve, it becomes a distraction. It becomes a place you run away to. So instead of dealing with what I'm going through at the moment, instead of living life now, or rather being grateful of the now, being grateful of the life that God has given to me now, I would often find myself running away into the future. It's like I had created like a time capsule for myself. So nilikuwa naingia tu hapo ndani. I'm there and I'm just thinking about my future. So I started using my future as a distraction. And I got so immersed. I was in so deep that my future became an idol. This idea, this utopia that I have created in my mind. At this point, it's not even clear. I mean, who even says that is the future? I don't know if I believe we have talked about this here before on the podcast. When you're like, you want something so badly, but who even says that is what you are meant to have? Case in point, so many people right now in this country really want to go abroad because, tough economic times. I mean, life is hard right now. And so the only best option, the only possible solution is to leave the country and look for greener pastures abroad. That we just get fixated on that. A lot of people have spent a lot of their time and energy and money, even just fundraising, to be able to go abroad. And then you just get frustrated when either applying for your visa, it gets denied, you're not able to leave the country anymore. And many people have gotten heartbroken because the truth of the matter is, just because you want something so badly doesn't mean you are meant to have it. And this future that I had created, this future that I was so fixated on, at this point, now thinking about it, I'm just like, who even says that is my future? Who says that is the future that God has in store for me? I mean, yes, it is great in my head. And I know I've said this so many times. So many times that I'm just like, I spend a lot of my time in my head. Just thinking about things, thinking about life. Now I was spending a lot of my time thinking about my future. And when I realized, remember when you were saying those signals that let us know that, the path we are taking is not the right path. When I realized that this thing was getting dangerous was when I started getting angry at God for not realizing these snippets of my future or this thing that I wanted. I'd be like, why is this not happening? Again, which takes me back to that issue of control, which we spoke about in our previous episode. Let me tell you. Because now I have glorified this future so much that I have all my attention, all my time are focused on this thing, this abstract thing. I remember, of course, I mean, this future that I had created, I mean, I was earning a certain amount of money. I was able to do so many things that I have not been able to do at the moment. And again, remember, it's not to say that these things are not good. I mean, God desires for us to live a good life. It's God's desire for us to live a good life, a life where we're able to provide for all our needs through Him, a life where we're able to meet our needs, a life where we're able to get the jobs that we want or even marry the partner that we want. I mean, it's God's desire for us to live a good life. But when we turn that whole idea into an idol where you become so fixated, it's possible for us to get so lost in all that daydreaming, where you even find yourself you're at work or even you're with your family, but you're not really there with them. All you're thinking about is what is going to happen 10 years from now, or when you get that job. When I get this job, I'm going to be able to do A, B, C, D. Finally, I'm going to be able to live the kind of life that I wanted. I remember that is the headspace I was in until I got convicted. And it literally hit me in the face. Straight hard on the face. And I could just hear God asking me, who says that if you don't have these things, that you won't be able to live a full life? Who said that you need to be earning millions of dollars for you to live a full life? I remember I was on my way home from church and I was just walking, and that question, I was just like, yeah, who said that I cannot live a full life now? Why do we have to lie to ourselves that a full life only exists in the future, or a better life only exists in the future? So much so that we end up spending a lot of our time building all these castles in the air. We have to spend a lot of our time daydreaming, doing a lot of wishful thinking. That is not really getting us anywhere. That these very things become idols. These very things, these good things that we hope for, these good things that we pray for, end up becoming the very things that keep us away from God, the giver of life. So it was while I was thinking about all these things that I realized that it's possible to spend so much time thinking about the future or being fixated about a reality that is even yet to happen, that is not even a reality that is not even confirmed, that you're not even sure would actually happen. Yeah, it's very easy for us to become deluded by all this wishful thinking, building castles in the air. And while it might, the future, or just knowing that better days are coming, that all things work out for good, while yes, those things can be used or can be a source of hope when things get tough, it really isn't the solution. It's not. Imagine it's not. Our hope is in Christ. Our hope is in the unshakable truth that God will never leave us, He will never forsake us, that He has good plans for us, as it says in Jeremiah 29:11, that these plans that He has for us have already given us a hope and a future, an expected end. It's already guaranteed that you have a future. It's already guaranteed that you have an expected end that is good, right? It's already there. It's already guaranteed. So if we already have a future, if we already have that expected end, why do we need to focus so much of our time on that we fail to appreciate the life that God has given us now? And we always like to say, live your life or live every day as if it is your last. I'm always thinking, if I am spending so much of my time thinking about the future, what will be, what is yet to come, Am I living the life that God wants me to live right now, in this moment? And yes, we're always told live in the present, be in the present. But again, what does that even mean? What does that even mean? Because my idea of living in the present or being present is being aware of the things God is doing in my life right now. Being aware of the lessons that God is teaching me right now. Being aware, being available to the people that God is placing in my life right now. And even as I say this, it's just bringing to mind that verse that says that he who is faithful with the little, will also be faithful with much. And how I'm correlating it with this particular context is most times, even like for myself, let me use my story or my instance as an example. Even while I was spending so much of my time thinking about the future, I failed to realize that there are so many things that are happening in my life right now that are actually preparing me for that future that God has for me. These lessons, and especially in this particular season of my life, God has really been reminding me that there's no room for me to be comfortable. There's no room for me to be in my comfort zone. Literally, every time I get comfortable, he just shakes up my life, and I'm reminded that Ebu, stay awake, be watchful. Like how he went and found the disciples sleeping just before his getting arrested and being crucified. I always find myself in that situation where I've gotten so comfortable such that God has just found me asleep, and he's like, Ebu, wake up and stay alert. So when I spend a lot of my time thinking about the future, when I idolize the future, when I idolize that expected end, that good expected end that God has already promised me, then it stops me from experiencing a full life right now. And that is why in that moment, because I kept thinking that so many, in the future, so many things will have happened. Either we'll have gotten married and we'll have children, I'll be living in a certain area, or I'll be earning a certain amount of money, or even just the dreams that I have of starting whatever initiative that I want to come up with, that all those things will have happened and I'll really be living a good life, a full life. And God is like, but who said you cannot live a full life right now? When we idolize money, who said that you need to have that huge sum of amount in your bank account for you to live a full life? When you idolize relationships or being married, who said that you have to be in a relationship? Who said that you have to be married for you to live a full life? When you idolize your career or your job, my question is, who says that you have to have that job? Who says that your career needs to take a certain path for you to live a full life? Who says? The only person who has a say in your life is God. And most times we have been lied to that we have a say in our lives. We don't. Sometimes I always think that God, I think I have said this here before, I feel like God allows for certain things to happen in our lives so that we can learn a lesson. Sometimes we can really want things so badly that God is like, okay, have at it. Go ahead, have at it. And then you learn your lesson and you come back and you realize that, you are not the captain of your own ship. or the pilot or whatever that saying goes. It is not true. There's only one person who is the author and the finisher of our faith, of our lives. He has written down our stories. And he allows for us to exercise our own will, because he also wants to use those moments for them to be teachable moments to us, and even teachable moments to other people. Sometimes I remember I even said it in the very, very first episodes. I was saying, you might be seeing someone walking and they fall into a hole. Sometimes even that, it doesn't mean that you have to walk to that same hole and then you experience what you need to experience for you to learn that lesson. Sometimes it's possible to see someone falling. It's possible to see someone falling into a hole and knowing that, yep, if I take that path, I will also experience the same thing. So how about I take a different route? And there's so much that life has to offer to us now. And that is a conviction that I got this past month. That yes, I have so many beautiful desires. I have so many wishes, so many dreams. But these very things can be the very things that are hindering me from experiencing God's love, God's presence, His blessings, and the gifts that He is bestowing upon me at this very moment. And I think I am grateful to have gotten to that realization. It is possible to live a full life right now. I don't know what exactly you're going through in life. Maybe it's a job that you have applied for and are really, really praying and hoping that you get that job. Or maybe it's getting married. Maybe this is a desire that you have had for a long time. Don't let that thing, that desire, that hope, that future, don't let it steal the glory that belongs to God. Let Him be your joy. Like when you delight, even that verse that says, delight yourself in the Lord. When we delight ourselves in the Lord, then He is able to, lift us up, uplift us, and also give us the desires of our heart. Delighting yourself in the Lord is just fixing your gaze on Him, like Him being the person you look to and just trust in, depend on always. Even in that moment when things are not working out, just fixing your eyes on Him. It is possible for God to reveal to us the future that He has in store for us, or the great things that He has in store for us. Even that verse that says, call unto me and I will show you great and marvelous things that you know nothing about. These great and marvelous things, they're not so that we can turn away from God and focus on these things. These things are meant for us to even give God more glory and all the glory. That job that you're hoping for, it's not so that you can focus on that job. It's so that you can, give God all the glory through that job. That relationship, that marriage that you desire, it's not so that you may glorify that marriage or glorify that relationship. It's so that you can glorify God through that relationship, through that marriage. The money that we are all constantly looking for, it's not so that we can become slaves to it. Yeah? It's so that we can use those same resources, those same monies to glorify God in our giving, in our supporting those who are in need, in being able to pursue our purposes, the vehicles for which we progress our purpose, or that which God has put in us. Even that fame, so many of us, I think, growing up always thought that, hey, people who are famous are living a good life. And then you come to realize that it is possible to live a full, abundant life, just, quiet and private. Like, you don't have to be famous to enjoy life or to live a good life, right? So idols are not just the miniature mini gods that man has either created for themselves, but idols are those things that take the glory that belongs to God. I mean, all glory belongs to God. All glory belongs to God. So the minute you find yourself giving that glory to something else, then that thing is an idol. For me, it has been relationships, it has been money, it has been my career, but most recently it has been the future. Using it as an escape route to escape whatever it is going on in my life. And yeah, it can get you delusional, and it can get you so far away from God's presence, so far away from the very, very things that He has intended for you. So that is also something that you can think on yourself. What are some of the things that you can name as idols? And you can just list them down. What are the things that you have made idols in your life? Is it having a family? Is it being in a relationship, getting married? Is it having a certain job or a certain career? Is it fame? What have you idolized? And then ask yourself, is the world going to end if this thing doesn't exist? And I've been seeing this trend on TikTok where people are saying, Ati, me knowing that life didn't end when, for example, the man I wanted to marry rejected me, such like things. I mean, the world will not end when you do not get that job or when you do not make that much money. It is possible to live a full life right now. And the only way you can do that is just by living your life for God's glory. Yeah. And I think it's also something that I am learning, and it's not an easy lesson. And it's a lesson that we will have to keep learning and learning. Because as human beings, being creatures of habit, I know that at one point or another, I will find myself going back to that state of thinking about the future a lot. But now that I know that, yes, God has good plans for me, plans to give me hope and a future, knowing that that future is guaranteed in God and through God, I don't have to worry and think so much about my future. All I can do right now is just glorify God right now and be content and be grateful for what God is doing in my life right now, being aware of the lessons God is teaching me right now, and living that life, living that full and abundant life right now, knowing that I will keep living this full life. I mean, even as I close, there are people who have all the fame in the world, all the money in the world, but they're not really living a full life. They're not living an abundant life. Because abundance is not about the material wealth. It's not about all this materialistic ideas or connotations that we have placed upon ourselves. Abundance is a state of mind. It's a state of heart. It's a mindset. It's a lifestyle, and it's so personal. It's so custom made to each and for each and every one of us. And I hope, and it is my prayer, that you will be able to live a full life without all these many things that you have glorified. Just write them down. What are the things that you have allowed to take all the glory or most of the glory in your life? When we say let all glory be unto you, let it just not be something that we say, but let it be truth. Let it be an affirmation to God that indeed all glory belongs to you. That even if this job is taken away from me, even if something happens, God forbid, to my family, even if I don't get married, even if I don't get into that relationship, even if I don't get to travel abroad or even go abroad as I have desired, whatever it is, that you will still live a full life, because one thing remains constant. And one thing will remain constant, and that is, God in your life. He is always there with you, whether you know it or not. Yeah, so that's it for today's episode. I hope you have gotten a thing or two. I hope this has been useful and valuable to you. Please do let me know what you think about today's episode. You can go ahead and let me know in the comment section if you're listening to this episode on YouTube, or you can let me know your thoughts in the Q&A section if you're listening to this episode on Spotify. Remember, the Abundant Self podcast is available on all podcast streaming platforms, so be sure to share, to follow, and to rate our podcast, and share this episode with a friend, share this episode with that family member, share this episode with whoever comes to mind, whoever you feel and believe in your heart will need to hear this episode. Go ahead and share this episode with them, and let it be a source of inspiration and a source of transformation for them, as it has been for you and as it has been for me as well. And if you enjoy what we do here on the podcast, if you love our content, then I'll invite you to also consider support the work that we do by sending a small contribution to our till number, especially if you're listening in from Kenya. And you can also purchase either one of our merchandise. We are selling thermomags, we are selling t-shirts, we are selling hoodies. And if you are interested in supporting the podcast by purchasing either one of our merchandise, then you can reach out to me on WhatsApp using the phone number that I have left on the show notes. Yes, I believe that is it for today's episode. Like I always like to say, if you remember nothing else from today's episode, I hope you remember that you have been called to have life, and life in abundance, and that I am rooting for you. Until the next one, bye-bye.